So the topic that we're choosing, I kind of chose it. We're starting with the phrase aware of being aware. And I started talking about this with a group which we're training for doing the interview process and reflective meditation. So it's just been circling around my mind, and Nelly took it up with me.
Yeah,
So
and this
we're
is something from my early Vipassana practice that was like a puzzle that I could never solve. What did that mean when my teachers would say, "Are you aware of being aware?" And I go, "What is she talking about?" At any rate, we're going to maybe clarify some of our views around that
yeah.
in this conversation. But did want to note that this topic or our views may be provocative for some people because it goes against well, it goes against how it's viewed in later Buddhism and actually in some Vipassana teachers. So, but we're going to talk about our way of seeing it on our training.
Right. So we're stating this up front because actually the phrase itself, aware of being aware, is a more modern language, a 20th and 21st century language. And it is something that it has become popular. And with that popularity, also confusion creeps in, that it actually can really be mystifying. Ellie, as you were talking about, like, what does that mean? And it's interpreted quite a few different ways. So you're getting our interpretation, and I like giving that as a upfront, somewhat warning, in case you are provoked by what we're going to be saying.
And when we say confusion can creep in, one kind of confusion is there such a thing as pure, pristine awareness? And this is taught in later Buddhism, but and that sort of reifies and says there is aware, and you can get to a thing that is always, if you practice long, hard, fortuitously, you will get to something that is it. You will have arrived at the ultimate pure awareness. Which,
Right.
go ahead, Linda.
Well, I'm just kind of adding on that it's pure, but it's always there. There's a
Right.
kind of like there's things that get tagged on to that you don't really even realize when you're maybe searching for something that's pure. You're also looking for something that's permanent or
Right.
always present. You just can't see it, so the fault lies with you.
Right. And that is certainly not how we understand the marks of existence. We don't think there's something that's always there. So, um, and if you're really like in have this goal of getting to this pristine, always there, pure awareness, it's very likely that you would bypass many of the ethical or relational, and most importantly, I'd say, well, maybe I can't say most importantly, very importantly, um, conditional dimensions of this practice. Because if we really understand conditionality, how could something always be there? It just doesn't
Right.
make sense.
Right. It is also a time where the practice got divided into an absolute understanding and conventional understanding. And so, this idea of bypassing, for me, it feels like at times it excuses certain ethical or relational misunderstandings or things that doesn't give it the priority that at times I think it needs within a practice for one to have a wider perspective or a wider understanding.
Yeah. Um, so I think we already kind of touched on this, but it
Mm-hmm.
really conflicts with the early Buddhist teachings on anatta, that there's not an enduring self that's always there, and conditionality, that things shift and change based on conditions.
Yeah. So I think we wrote three paragraphs up, which I think we'll read and then kind of have a little conversation after each paragraph. I'll read this first paragraph. Um, in early Buddhism, awareness isn't understood as a direct window into reality. Awareness is not solely the object of itself. So not what just like what you're aware of, but the intimacy of how that awareness is happening. So sometimes you're not, oh, well, let me say, you're not always aware the same way. So we are not aware of things as they are, but of things as they are experienced. What we can know directly is not the object itself, but the process of awareness and knowing. Hence, aware of being how we're aware.
Okay, there's actually a lot folded into that paragraph, wasn't there? We may not make it through all the paragraphs today, which is just fine. We can continue on. Uh, but so really the thing that's most salient in this is that we really can't know directly the object, but we can know more about the process of awareness and knowing. And there is that fantasy that we could really know, really know the object itself. We could really like nail it down.
Right. Right. I'm just, as you said, the fantasy of that, Nellie. I do feel like there is something within that fantasy that if I know that, then I'm standing on certain ground.
Right.
Like that I really nobody can can debate me. I'm not wrong. I won't be humiliated or subject to the kind of questioning that comes with alternate views. That there is something very fantasy about that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There
Fantasy
is.
like.
Um, and I'm just thinking this now, so I'm curious what you think, Linda, but it seems like a lot of what we're discussing in the conversations with people about their meditation is more about the process of awareness. We actually are asking those kinds of questions and not so much about, I mean, we ask something about
Mhm.
the object, but a lot we lean into the process. You think that's true?
I do. I think it's a safer place to start. We often start there. How were you with something? Can you tell me more about that experience? What you were thinking, feeling about it?
Mm-hmm.
But I also want to say, Nellie, is that the content also gives us more information about the process because different content has different processes.
That's
So
true.
I just don't want to devalue the content, which I think at sometimes it is. It's talked about as a story, or that's just
Yeah.
not important.
No, it is important, but the flip side of that, well,
Yeah,
it's like and
yeah.
this is a gross generalization here, but in normal kind of languaging out in the world, people are mostly just talking about the objects. They're not talking about awareness. And then in certain Buddhist circles, they're just talking about the awareness. So forget that stuff out there. But we are interested in both.
Yeah, and that does really put us in this kind of middle way of really, not at either extreme, though we could go to those extremes, right? That's it doesn't mean we don't go there, but we are looking at this process and content middle way. Yeah.
And the thing that I know struck you as we spoke earlier and does strike me as well, but our intimacy with how
Mhm.
awareness is happening. And I would even change the wording a little bit of becoming more intimate with how
Mm,
awareness is happening, that's a lot of our
mm,
practice is becoming more intimate, knowing it better, knowing it more
right.
closely, more intimately.
Well, I don't know if you're referring, I think you're referring to standing close to our experience. This is a translation of sati, is
Hmm.
that we're leaning into it, becoming more intimate with it. And that word intimacy, it wasn't around in the Pali Canon, but it really does fit for what we're doing with our experience, is becoming more intimate with it.
And I love that translation, Versati, standing near experience. That's actually my favorite translation.
So you probably were referring to it in some way. Yeah.
Well, I'm
Oh,
looking at
wow.
the
We got
time.
through one paragraph.
So that's great. We have more paragraphs to come.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. We'll end here. And Nellie, I think you're on bells today if you've got a bell close to you.
Oh, yes.